Good day, everyone. I'm Keisha Rollins from Care Nursing Agency. Today, we are going to be discussing environmental health with respect to food safety. Food-related diseases affects tens of millions of people worldwide and kill thousands each year. A foodborne illness is caused by eating or drinking a contaminated food or beverage. Food safety programs are dedicated to educating the public about food safety and environmental health issues. This helps to inform, educate, improve, prepare, response, and prevention of foodborne diseases within both the home and industrial workforce. The food safety sessions can be used for someone just beginning their career in the food industry or a professional with many years of experience or someone at home. September was National Food Safety Month worldwide, and Care Nursing Agency would like to take this opportunity to recognize the hard work and dedication of those in the food safety workplace, like our guest, Mr. Lake. We thank him for helping us to shed light and to recognize the importance of food safety as we highlight the government's contributions over the years, especially as we fight COVID-19 pandemic. Let's get back to basic and all our foodborne pathogens and learn what makes the bad bugs tick and how to prevent them from contaminating our food. Training offers guidelines and best practices for specific food safety topics and various environmental health situations that may present themselves during this unprecedented time. Each individual training offers a clear and concise overview of food safety and provides guidance for acceptable best practices. I want to welcome Mr. Lake to our doors. Mr. Lake, thank you so much for coming on out. I know you are a busy man, and we appreciate your efforts in helping us as not just people who are professionally cooking, but those who are also in the home or around food in whatever manner or form. Can you tell us a little about yourself?
Okay. Good morning and thanks for having me. I am Jermaine Lake, Deputy Chief Environmental Health Officer with responsibility for vector control, let me say that. But you met me this week filling in the food safety training. I'm filling in for our food safety officer who is on vacation. Nonetheless, I'm thankful to be here to give you some insights into our food safety training and how foodborne illnesses are impacting us and what we can do to mitigate against food safety issues. So with that, any questions, any topic related to that I'll get into, and others related to general environmental health, because they all tied in, especially in this COVID-19 environment.
Well, I am involved in food so much so that I am now beginning to eat from the pot more. I've asked my patients or my clients, what do they do to reach to the age that they have, some 97-year-olds and stuff. So I wanted to get an insight in what do we do to get there. And one of the things I keep saying is what we put in our mouth. And I've been hearing it a lot because of diabetes and heart attacks and hypertension. So I started to eat from the pot. So when I came to get my food handler's permit, I was very impressed and blown away by the wealth of knowledge that I received that day. And I realized I too need to go back to basics and go back to doing things a little better and more efficient. And I learned things I never knew, even as a nurse. So that's why I wanted to have you here so the general public could know what I know. So what I want you to do is the same trend you took that day, you can go right ahead, because I don't have a question that you didn't answer.
Okay, all right. I think usually whenever I speak or give a lecture, I do anecdotes, little stories about the related topic so that persons could better grasp what we are talking about. It doesn't really do too much good when you delve into the fancy terms that you would learn in school and so on. And so I try to mix some of the fancy terms with the anecdotes.
Right.
Now, food safety for most times is caused by some pathogen, some organism, a germ, a virus. Most times it's also caused by other elements, physical elements. It might be a piece of board, a piece of wood, or sometimes chemicals. Persons may have chemicals too close to the food, etc. But for the most part, the food safety issues are caused by bacterial growth or bacterial poisoning or viral contamination. And bacteria, as you would know as a nurse, could make you sick in two ways. One, by giving off toxins, or two, by accumulating or growing to such large numbers that when you consume a plate of food, it's almost as if you're consuming a plate of bacteria. And those are the main two ways in which we see it. So if you hear about Clostridium botulinum, for instance, and most persons might know about Botox treatments. Botox treatments come from the bacteria Clostridium botulinum, and that bacteria, it makes you sick by giving off a toxin, or what we call food intoxication. And so it doesn't require large numbers of the bacteria to be present, but rather just sufficient giving off the toxin that it makes you sick. And it lives in cans, it lives in the soil, it lives in anaerobic or areas where it doesn't need oxygen, contact with oxygen, to grow and survive. And it's a little bit more challenging in that if you were to put some food in the fridge or freezer which contains some Clostridium and remove it to reheat it, Clostridium might form a spore around it and make it much more difficult to destroy it during the reheating process. So that's one way where they poison you. The other way, sometimes persons, you may cook food and you have it there in what we call the temperature danger zone, between 5 degrees Celsius and 50 degrees Celsius, or generally the temperature at which man lives. And the bacteria multiplies from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8, 16, 32, 64, etc. And you have so much bacteria at the end of the day that eating that food is just as good as just eating plain old bacteria. And then you start to get the signs and symptoms: vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pains. And long term, some of them could cause kidney damage, liver damage, etc. And what happened too is that in our environment, food safety, foodborne illnesses don't get a lot of attention. Persons are more focused on if there's a car accident, if there's a homicide somewhere. Those things tend to make national news far more. But one of the things we're seeing is that we have far more vendors now on the streets. Well, not on the street, far more food vendors in general. And we have far more persons interacting with food handlers, because the culture seems to be changing. You know, before on a Sunday it was almost like a sin to not eat home, right? And now, if you go by KFC on a Sunday, you see a long line. If you go by the other restaurants, you see lines. Best Buy sell food, you see a line. And so persons, I think partly due to the fact that persons may be more busy, it's more convenient, etc., to go and purchase food. Persons are interacting more with food handlers, and thus the likelihood of foodborne illnesses occurring increases. We also have more tourism, and when tourists come, or when they go on a vacation, they're looking for an experience, and part of that experience is the dining. And so we have more cruise ships, we have more hotel guests. They come on a cruise ship, food is everywhere, and so when they get to the destination, they oftentimes want to experience the local food. And so you have more guests, more foreign guests interacting with our food handlers, and all of that is driving a need for more focus on food safety. And we see numbers, because we get reports of the foodborne illnesses, and we need to ensure that we keep a cap on that, and we keep mitigating factors in place so that foodborne illnesses don't explode on us. One of the things we do is to have the food handlers clinics, and food handlers play a vital role in the whole process. I think one of the things that might have grasped your attention was when I said that usually every month we go and we do swabbing, where one of our officers, we randomly choose some restaurants. We go to the restaurant, the officers take a sample of food, and they swab somewhere in the kitchen environment. They swab either one of the workers' hands, or they swab a pot, a plate, a knife, the door handle, doorknob, etc. And we take those to the lab, and the lab analyzes it, and they're looking for the level of sanitation in the kitchen environment. And sometimes we see such large numbers of mold, fungi, bacteria, viruses, either on a worker's hands or on a doorknob or some other place within the kitchen environment, that we have to close the establishment, have them do a general sanitation, and speak to the workers, and then have those workers get a better understanding of sanitation, the need to frequently wash your hands, and maintain a really good sanitary environment inside the food place in order for us to go forward and not have these foodborne illnesses. I think that might have captured your attention.
Yes.
Because I would have told you, for example, there about coliform bacteria and E. coli, for instance, and sometimes we may find large numbers of coliform bacteria, maybe on a worker's hands, a doorknob, or some other place in the kitchen environment. And this is indicative of persons going to the bathrooms and not washing their hands properly. And coliform bacteria are what we call indicator organisms, and the indicator for this, in the sense that their presence indicates that somehow fecal contamination occurred. And so coliform bacteria are those bacteria which we should not be seeing at all in any numbers. We should not be seeing them in the kitchen environment, lest we cause food safety issues. So it's usually the bacteria, the virus, and then sometimes, I could give you an example. A few years ago, we saw an individual who used a bucket to prepare some chemical, weedicide or herbicide, and she threw the herbicide into a spec and went and sprayed her farm to get rid of weeds and so. And then she washed out the bucket, quote unquote, and she proceeded to use the same bucket to prepare chicken in and make person sick.
Wow.
So you have things like that. And these are things which persons have to be aware of and be smart with. We have cases where flour comes in on the cargo boats, then the bakeries use the long flatbed trucks to transport the flour. The back of the trucks, where they lay the flour down, is oftentimes made of wood. And so when the guys are pulling the bag of flour off the truck, sometimes you have splinters sticking up. And so as you pull the flour, wood splinters, wood chips go into the flour. And if the bakers don't sift properly the flour, then you end up with a piece of bread with wood chips in it. Somebody might sharpen a knife. Someone might sharpen a knife and not properly clean the knife, and then you have filings from the knife there, and it ends up in food somehow. So those are some of the examples. And then we have pests. You would know about leptospirosis.
Yes.
Every year we see maybe 4 or 5 cases of leptospirosis. And most times when we see a case of leptospirosis, rats and mice are involved somehow. Rats and mice, wherever they feed, the number 1, the number 2. And some persons are naive enough to think that if they have some food and a rat or a mouse got to it, that they could just discard some and continue and consume the rest. So The very first time I saw a case was a gentleman from Old Road. He cooked some food outside. In his kitchen was detached from the main house, and he cooked. Then he didn't bother to eat that night. He said he went to sleep, left the food in the kitchen, and went back out the following morning, looked in the pot and noticed that a rat or mouse had consumed from the food before him. And he saw some droppings. He proceeded to take out what he thought was contaminated. Then he gave his dog some and he ate some. The dog died and he got leptospirosis. Swollen liver, jaundice, pain, aches all over, etc. And it was simply because of how the rats and mice operate. So we have those issues. We have issues with flies. Sometimes flies get to the food, like protein foods, fish, meat. Persons may have a showcase where they have fried chicken, fried fish, etc. in. And if the showcase is not properly closed, sealed, and flies get to it, then they lay the eggs, the whitey clumps on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that, in clusters. And I've seen that where the late, we would cut a fish on the side, throw some seasoning in it, and the flies would lay the eggs there, and sometimes inside the gills. And all of that is part of the whole food safety issue that I spoke about. And so persons need to be aware of that. And the whole food safety issue is now tied into general sanitation and environmental health, because without something to attract these pests such as flies, rats, mice, cockroaches, ants, we wouldn't have them around. And usually once the place is sanitary, once we have a good environment, good clean environment, you're keeping your garbage bin covered, you're regularly disposing of your garbage, you don't keep cracks in your walls, you're not keeping food sitting around, etc. We don't see these pests being attracted so that they're causing issues. But where we have poor sanitation, then you may have some of these issues leading to the foodborne illnesses at times. So I spoke about as well the need to ensure that the environment is clean, and not just the outside environment, but the kitchen environment. First and foremost, a bathroom. You must have a clean bathroom. For me, and for us in sanitation, a dirty bathroom is tantamount to a dirty kitchen. So if I enter an establishment and the bathroom is unkempt, it's dirty, smelly, look like it's not functioning, even if I have not seen the kitchen, and I am lucky enough to see a lot of kitchens, but the most customers don't, once I see that your bathroom is unkept, dirty and so on,
okay, we have to show you the bathroom.
I assume that the kitchen is dirty.
You're right.
Right? Because most human beings are creatures of habits.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you have some kind of habit, good or bad, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if your habit is to keep a dirty bathroom, most likely your habit is to keep a dirty kitchen and other parts of the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I presume if you're not aware enough to keep a clean bathroom, then you won't be careful enough in the kitchen either. Mm-hmm. And even if you keep your kitchen clean, but the bathroom is dirty, at some point you have to use the bathroom. And so you're increasing the likelihood of you contaminating the kitchen environment and the food.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it is an issue, and I advise persons to use that as a sort of gauge to measure what the kitchen environment might be like.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell you there are establishments out there with very, very well kept bathrooms and kitchens. In fact, the week before this, when I was doing a COVID-19 training, and I told a restaurant owner that he is one of my favorites because he keeps everything not just clean, but everything neatly packed and organized and so on. So it's difficult to find any issue there with him. He's one of the best, and I would ask persons, well, you can't show everybody his kitchen, but he's someone who persons should follow in terms of how to keep an establishment, keep the whole place well organized. There are persons you'll go and you'll meet a very good looking kitchen. It appears sanitary, but then you have some issue with the bathroom, or you have some issue with another area within the establishment. But it all goes hand in hand because it's about presentation as well.
Right.
When you enter an establishment, it should not be of dark colors. We don't grant you license for dark colors. It should be like the color of your roof, your ceiling here, white or cream. A light color so that persons could appreciate whether or not the place is clean. If it's dark colors, it's difficult to tell if it's clean. Yeah.
Interesting.
Again, all this coming back to sanitation. So yes, your bathroom must be clean. Then we ask that you sanitize your kitchen regularly, and one of my favorite sanitizers, as you said, Clorox or bleach, because bleach takes care of a wide spectrum of organisms, and it's relatively cheap. It's easy to use. So we ask, one, if you're washing your dishes, you use a bit of bleach, and then you air dry your dishes. You mop and wipe down the entire establishment with some bleach and water solution. Cleaning and sanitation, two things that go hand in hand, and persons may not make a distinction between cleaning and sanitizing, but there really is a big distinction. Cleaning is where you're getting rid of the things that you could see with your eyes. The dirt, the cobweb, plastic, paper and so on. Or if you have your hands full of mud, you are not going to take your hand and put them under your sanitizer dispenser here, because sanitizer is not going to get rid of the mud. You have to clean, you have to brush off your hands, you have to take something and brush it off, right? Or run it under some water. So that is cleaning. And so in your environment, cleaning would be like if you take a rake and you rake up the bush out your yard, or if you sweep out the inside of your office here, you brush down the roof, etc. Moving the physical things you can see with your eyes. But then that goes hand in hand with sanitizing. If you don't map this environment for a month, I guarantee you will develop a scent. Even if you come and sweep every day, you will have a scent. The reason being, you have mold, you have fungi, you have staphylococcus, you have E. coli, you have all sorts of organisms resident in here. And the only way to get rid of them is by sanitizing. A broom can't do that, right? And so that is where sanitizing comes in and plays a role. So mopping is sanitizing. Wiping down with a rag with some solution is sanitizing, and that's what we need to do from time to time. You sweep, then you mop. They go hand in hand. The sweeping, the cleaning comes first, and then the sanitizing. So you need to sanitize the environment. As I said, Clorox or bleach is one of my favorite sanitizers, and you could use it on almost everything. You could even use it to disinfect your water. If you're somebody who catches rainwater and you drink it, you use it for drinking or cooking. Well, of course you have to filter it, but you could also use some bleach, some chlorine to sanitize the water. It's fabulous. And so you want to ensure that the environment is sanitary as well. So you're cleaning on the level of what your eyes can see, and the sanitizing where you're going on the level of the microscopic level. So that is important for us. Another important item for us is these. These do mostly damage in food safety. These. Because people constantly touching things and interacting with their hands, right? For instance, if you're in a bakery, bakeries are a warm environment, and there is almost no way you will work in a bakery and maybe rolling bread or mixing flour, whatever, and not sweat. So therefore, how do you sweat and bake in a sanitary manner? You need to have a paper towels to wipe your face constantly, but you need to also be washing your hands frequently. And as simple as it may seem, sometimes persons don't do that often enough. And we would see that when we go and we swab persons' hands in the kitchen environment. So persons need to wash their hands when they go bathroom, when they handle garbage, if they go outside, if they just step outside for a break. Assume or presume that your hands got dirty somehow. If you go and handle chemicals, if you handle meat and then you need to handle something like lettuce, carrot or so.
That's a big deal, right?
Yeah, because meat in its natural stage, especially chicken or even egg, they have lots of bacteria. Chicken in particular, it always has high loads of salmonella on them. So you need to wash your hands in between there. Not just jump from this to that and think that all is well, because it's not. On the microscopic, it's not. So you wash your hands often after you handle money. If you go to mop or sweep, you wash your hands afterwards and move on to the next activity. Your hands must be washed often, and I advise persons to wash their hands even after 15 minutes. Even if they think they have not done anything to contaminate their hands, they should just wash their hands after 15 minutes. To wash your hands, you wet your hands under running water, apply some soap, and rub briskly on your hands. And you're rubbing from the forearm down to here, and you rub the inner surface, the crevices, and the outer surfaces of your hands. And we want you to do that for 20 seconds at least, right? Because 20 seconds contact time helps to break apart and destroy the bacteria and the viruses, especially COVID-19. Under the COVID-19 environment, that is paramount, washing your hands. And so you do that, you wash your hands for 20 seconds, then you rinse your hands under running water, and then you dry your hands with a paper towel, and use a paper towel to turn off the water, to turn the doorknob, and throw the paper towel in the trash. One-time use paper towel. We don't want persons using a cloth towel to dry their hands. It builds up contamination, and eventually when you're going to use it to dry your hands, you're basically contaminating or dirtying your hands again.
So you will recommend paper towel instead of the rag?
Not that I would recommend paper towel, it is what we recommend, not rags, not cloth rags.
Okay, well, I find that interesting because even at my granddaughter's school, they ask us to bring paper towel for the child to assist with cost, of course.
Yeah.
So I took the big pack. So I didn't know how long it would last, but she said, it's every day we have to use it. So
yeah,
I think that I need to get another pack.
Yeah. On the COVID-19, it is resource intensive in that we're using a lot more sanitizers, we're using a lot more paper towels, masks. So it's intensive, it's resource intensive, and as you would know, persons are losing a lot of money, businesses and so on. So persons, private sector, the government and so on have had to put out a lot more resources in an environment where they're producing or making less money. But it is necessary, and for food safety, for washing our hands in environmental health, we always advise you use paper towels. Once is washing hands, not cloth rag, otherwise you're going to contaminate your hands eventually.
Thank you for that. Can you give us a little more info on what is expected of us as not just people who cook at home, because we want safety for those at home, but those who are eating out this season in the public?
Okay. For the food handlers, they want to ensure that foods are not contaminated, and they ensure that, for instance, hot food should be kept hot. If you're a customer and you go, say, by a buffet or a vendor, observe how they're keeping their food. Hot foods, as I say, hot, keep the warmers under them, should see a little steam. The cold food should be kept cold. The condiments such as mayonnaise, salad dressing, etc. should be kept cold. They could keep a bowl with some ice, and then they keep the bottles, the containers with these condiments in them. And the salads should be similarly kept covered, and ensure that they don't get to this temperature that we consider the temperature danger zone, especially high protein foods. High protein foods are things like meat, fish, chicken, eggs, butter, milk, beans. So even the vegetarian foods, they could be ticklish too. Tofu, beans, because of the high protein content. Bacteria loves those types of food even more. So observe how persons are keeping them. And you yourself as the food handler should ensure that you keep them out of the temperature danger zone between 5 degrees Celsius and 50 degrees Celsius. And ensure that they're handling the containers, the plates, etc. properly. Ensure that they're observing sanitation issues. Vendors, for instance, should be keeping water around them so that they could wash their hands. They're not handling money. They're not handling other non-food items and then proceeding to whole food. Foods that are reheated should be reheated once and properly reheated. You bring a soup, for instance, to boiling, and if you don't use the rest, you discard it. The foods that you're storing in the fridge, you should store in a shallow container, not large containers, so that the food gets sufficiently cooled down. If you put in a large pot, a big pot or a big container of food in the fridge might not sufficiently cool it down, right?
That was very interesting to me.
Yeah. And it might not sufficiently cool it down as well. It might just make your fridge work harder trying to cool down this large container of food. So it's best you put it in the fridge in shallow containers, adequately cool it, and it's easier to reheat a small container of food too. Meats, fish, poultry, you should thaw them in the fridge on the lower end of the fridge, and not on the upper end where they could drip on lettuce, tomato, carrots, things ready to eat foods that you won't cook, right? And you want to ensure that you do thaw in the fridge. Chicken and them things really they should not be thawed outside the fridge. Meat, cook them thoroughly, cook them till the juices coming from them are no longer red or pink, but it should be clear. Or you use a meat thermometer, you stick it in the thickest part of the meat, like turkey and so turkey, ham, that's all the thick meat, and you ensure that you get a temperature around 180 degrees Fahrenheit or so. The water, a rolling boil. Eggs should not be runny, they should be firm. Your hamburgers should be cooked all the way through. Steak should be no medium rare, they should be cooked all the way through. Fish, your food that you're going to buy to use and so should also be uncompromised, meaning you don't want to buy carrots, lettuce, potatoes that are damaged, apples and so on. One, the damage ain't good, and two, the damage on one causes the others to spoil as well, right? So you want to ensure that those vegetables are wholesome, vegetables and fruits are wholesome. If you ever see me buying grape, you might get a little impatient because I study and I go through almost all the packs of grapes. Looking for them. Grapes develop fungus on them readily.
I've been seeing a lot of that though, you know.
And so you want to
and that's when they go on sale, so we got to be careful as consumers. Because that's when they decide to put them on sale when they're already getting to the point where you can't even consume.
Yeah.
Even though some might, I wouldn't want to buy that container anyway.
Yeah. So you look at that and you look to see how the condition. Things like fish, you want to buy fish when it's fresh. The gills should be red and not pinkish grayish. The eyes should be clear and not grey. Flesh should be firm and not soft. And you should buy from persons who keep their fish on ice. Some of them fishermen, they like to get the fish, take it out the boat and then toss it on the ground for display. They like when people looking at the fish, right? But the thing is that causes spoilage readily, and plus it's insanitary.
And the heat too.
Yeah. So that's a no-no. They should keep the fish on ice at all times. And
Interesting.
they should not be throwing the fish on the ground and so. So pay attention to that. The canned goods, don't buy canned goods if they're dented. Especially if the ends blow. If you see the ends blow, it's a sign of bacterial growth inside of the can. The inside of the can is coated with a gold coating. That gold coating is to prevent bacterial growth, to prevent the can from rusting, and to prevent the food from tasting like the can. Especially acidic foods like tomato paste, orange juice, pineapple juice. If you were to leave those in a can without the coating, they would start to break down the inside of the can, rust it and so on, and you'll get a bad taste. When a can falls or gets otherwise dented, it compromises that coating, and that could lead to rusting of the can on the inside where you may not see it, and give you a funny taste. The rust could allow bacterial growth. Is a no-no. If you have food in can and the can get dented, you want to use that right away. Don't buy food if they're expired. Don't buy... When you buy a flour, it's best to store flour in the fridge, especially once you open it. Flour, when they get it, the manufacturers are required to eliminate 99.9% of all weevil from flour. Weevil is a naturally occurring insect around flour, but sometimes the manufacturers may not get rid of that 0.01%. And in a warm environment like ours, if you leave flour out and it's open, the one weevil might multiply and become 2 and 4 and so on, and then when you look, your flour looking brown. So you want to store that properly. Then you have the concept of first in, first out. FIFO, FIFO. The items that you buy first, you want to use them first. So if you buy 2 cans of milk today and you buy 2 cans of milk next week, the ones you bought today, you want to use those first, and those you bought next week, you use them afterwards, so that you don't have goods expiring on you, and then you end up using these expired goods.
So we'll pack them behind in the cupboards and so, and then put those that we had, bring them forward, just like on the shelves.
Indeed, yeah. You want to keep that sort of rotation going. You want to use clean food, clean items in order to ensure that the food is not compromised somehow. Want to make sure your foods are cooked thoroughly. So that is most of it there for the food safety part. In a nutshell, there's a lot more to it, but as I say, I don't like to give the lot of schoolish kind of wording and so on. I give anecdotes so people understand more readily and appreciate more easily what the talk is about, and I think people catch on that way more easily. You have any questions?
Is there anything you could say to the general public, not just the consumers now, but you have said a lot, but for those that are cooking and buying to cook, whether it's a restaurant or a small business, or even if it's a large experience person who distributes food, cook and distribute, sells, what advice would you give them? Because sometimes the consumers in their rush
Uh-huh.
because of lack of time and all of that, we just buy. Sometimes we don't these things you tell us to check for now. We know we will check, but some of us are still gonna be rushed and we'll just buy. So what advice? So we have to help each other, of course. That's what's happening here. We have to help each other. So what advice would you give to those persons who knowingly do buy stuff, cook stuff, prepare stuff wrong because you don't have enough manpower to get to everybody to make sure every saying kids is safe. So what advice? Because we have to help each other and take responsibility and accountability for our actions. And what advice would you give to the persons who are selling food and
Look,
restaurants who provide services?
again, it's about habit. Look at the habits of the person who's selling the food. If the person observes certain behaviors, they neat, they clean, they keep a clean environment, that is the first sign that they're doing things properly. Because again, we are all creatures of habit, and thus if we have a bad habit here, we'll take that habit elsewhere. Or if we have a good habit, we'll take it elsewhere too, whatever habit. So observe their habits, observe how they keep the environment around them. If it's a restaurant, observe the bathroom, observe how they keep the kitchen. Sorry, not the kitchen, because most people don't see the kitchen. Observe how they keep the general area where you may be, whether they have the place nicely painted. Observe whether it's clean, the scent, if there's a foul odor, that sort of thing. Because most persons who are in the food business, they don't want anything to drive away their customers. So it's all about sanitation. Observe how they bring the food to you. If they can bring the food on a plate and their fingers on the plate and so on, that's a no-no. If they can come to you with the hair flowing down and loose and so on, that's a no-no. If they can come to you with long fingernails, nail polish, that's a no-no. One of the things, I remember going to visit a place one day, a restaurant, a band restaurant, and they had a young lady walking, and she had on long fingernails with some bright blue polish. So you couldn't miss it. She had just done them, it seems. I told her, you can't be walking with those fingernails. One, they're too long. Two, you have wrong polish. She said, well, Mr. Lake, I prefer my fingernail them than the job, you know. I said, well, you're going to have to leave. So I told her I'll go in and come back. And I come back, she left the job. She said she prefers she fingernails.
Well, that was good for us, the
Yeah.
consumers, because
Yeah.
pieces of that nail
Yeah.
polish could have been in our burger or whatever.
Yeah. So
She did us a favor, actually.
yeah. Between all of Bastille, we have about 700 vendors, I think. Yeah, about that. And so it's more important that we at Ministry of Health be more vigilant. We inspect everyone. There's an initial inspection for granting you a license, a health license to operate, and then you get your business license out of that. Then we are required to inspect everyone else annually once you open. Depending on the type of business you're in, we should be inspecting you at least twice per year. A bakery, for instance, should be like twice per year at least. And one of the best signs for sure, if you ever see a health inspector going around a place, often if you see a health inspector, environmental health officer rather, going back to a place, that's a sign that they have some sort of issue. We don't generally go back to the same place right away unless there are issues outstanding. So that, but observe how they keep themselves. Observe the apron, the fingers, the jewelry, that sort of thing.
I remember you said that the apron should be white without rainbow on it, meaning it shouldn't be dirty.
Yeah.
But a lot of business places use black aprons. I'm seeing that shouldn't be, I don't
No,
think.
because it's difficult to tell whether the apron is dirty.
Okay.
So they should be wearing a white apron so you could tell when it's dirty, and they should be washing them.
I don't
daily.
ever think I've ever saw a white apron, other than if it's plastic.
No, they have
They
white,
have?
cloth white
Oh.
aprons. Yeah. That's the best thing. It's similar to having a white wall inside of the restaurant so we could tell when it's dirty.
Mhm.
All of that is part of the requirement. Because if we don't, then how are we to tell whether the apron that they have on is clean or not? If we go there and we inspecting. So we want the white apron, neat clothing. The first part really is the personal hygiene for the workers, managers, whoever in the food environment, and then the preparation of the food. And that is why we would have to go under the swabbing every month to see whether the place is sanitary. And then there are other things to go with it. A restaurant, they need a grease trap, that sort of thing. If anybody in downtown grease trap fail, we know right away, the same week. Because once grease goes out in the drain cleaner would know. People will complain because it creates a scent, and then we have to send somebody to speak to them to repair their grease issues.
So you're actually you have a lot of hats, in this area, this field that you're in.
Yeah, well,
That's meaning that you do a lot because this goes way, it exceeds what I really thought was food safety.
yeah. Miss Glenville leader is our food safety specialist, officer. He's on vacation, but yes, it's a lot. And then when you add in hotels and all the other establishments, it becomes even more challenging. There's a good bit more to it, but like I said, I try to condense
Mhm.
and speak to things that people would quickly grasp.
Mhm.
The food safety is a big issue, and it's growing every week. 10 years ago, I don't think we had 300 establishments in Bastille. No, we had about 700. And the officer for each area has to visit all these places. I think I told you over 300 in East Bastille. And the officer for the area has to visit all of them, right?
Mhm.
And every week we get in new applications for businesses. So you have to visit all of them. And if some of them will have issues, you have to go back to those issues. Then he still has the hundreds to visit. Then revisit and then visit those new applicants to ensure that they're meeting our requirements and that they're ready to open.
Well, I don't think the public, probably most of us, we are novices to this, especially myself. I don't think we have realized how essential this is, having you guys and the extent of what you do, and now having that more than 100% markup with new businesses. You said being farm, so your department needs to go actually because you need help.
Well, to be honest, we at our full complement of staff now, so I don't think the staffing is an issue at the moment, but the applicants, the vendors and so on, they've grown much faster than how we have grown. And then with the issues related to all of that have grown faster than for instance though, during December, a typical December, this is not a typical December at all, you would see a lot more vendors in downtown, especially with grills and so on. And every year for the past number of years, we've had to take up grills off the street. Vendors would venture downtown with the barbecue grill, leave the grill overnight. And then when I'm driving on the Bay Road in the morning to go to work, I see grills sitting down. And guess what? That my fly is getting to them.
Because
So
if some of them probably don't even clean the grill before they start to put the chicken.
and that's another issue we don't know.
You
So
don't know.
once I see that, I would send one of the guys down by us to pick up the grills and hold them here at the health center and get the owners to come, and we tell them why we pick up the grill and that they should take their grills with them at evenings whenever they
But
finish.
this is what I'm saying. What you have to do, some of it is way beyond your paycheck. because this even doing that to make sure we are safe, we don't even know that you're doing that.
Yeah. COVID-19 has put a spotlight on a lot of the things that we do, and is good so that persons could get a better idea and better appreciate what we're doing and what is going on. I don't think people realize that there are food safety issues ongoing. I think people, for the most part, think that there are no issues. There are. Sometimes persons come and make complaints and say, well, I ate some food from XYZ, but I like the food and me and them get along well. I don't want to tell them and I don't want them to know. But can you please send somebody discreetly? And that happens regularly, yeah. That happens regularly. So please send somebody discreetly and we do that. Yeah.
Okay. So, Mr. Lake, are there anything else? I know there's more, but interest of time, is there anything else you would like to add for us, the consumers and the providers of food for our federation? Anything that you'd like to say before we complete our sit-down conversation?
Just a little bit on the food, and then I would just like to say a bit about COVID-19. With regards to the food handlers, just to observe the regulations, protocols, requirements that you are told of when you attend the food handlers clinics. Be aware that there are food safety issues out there impacting us, and do your part to ensure that you're not contributing to foodborne illnesses, because when they usually have a long-term issue. If you have a food establishment, persons eat from you and they have an issue, they end up with some sort of issue, then it changes their mind, and then word of mouth goes around and impacts you economically. It might put persons in the hospital, etc. So pay attention to the requirements and try to ensure that you're handling, you're preparing, you're serving food in the best manner possible. I would just like to say about COVID-19, observe the protocols, ensure you're washing your hands, ensure that you're wearing masks, social distancing, because that is an issue that is going to be with us for the better part of the next year. Hopefully by late next year it eases, but for now, until we get a sufficient number of persons in the Federation vaccinated, we will be under these guidelines, and we will have to maintain them. The next thing I wanted to speak about is mosquito issues. We're in a rainy period. We have a large outbreak of dengue in the southern Windward Islands, almost 30,000 cases from Guadeloupe down to Grenada. And with the opening of the borders and more movement, and even with trade, because we have boats coming from the Windward Islands all the time, and any of the crew members could be impacted.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways that some mosquitoes spread is through boats and so on. We want to ensure that we're not creating an environment that is friendly to mosquitoes, keeping receptacles, trash around where the mosquitoes could breed, multiply, and then cause an outbreak of dengue. So we need to ensure that we keep a clean and sanitary environment and play our part in the fight against dengue and play a part in the fight against COVID-19. Thanks for having me.
Okay, Mr. Lake, I'm so happy that you came and put it out there on the air for us to all know and look back. We can always go back and listen again, because I will do that, about all the measures we have to take into consideration. And we don't want any more pandemics on our hands. We're already fighting COVID-19 successfully so far without any reported deaths. So as a nurse, I am really concerned about a lot of issues, and that's why we have sit-downs and health series addressing these issues as we come along. And we'll soon have gastroenteritis as one of our series, because we realize the need for that in a time like this, even though this season is a bit different to the other Christmases that we might have. None the same. People gonna try and find ways to be creative and to enjoy themselves, whether it's with family or with friends. And because people are coming home, most people would be out of quarantine during the period of December 25th, and we know that's a time when people get together, and it wouldn't change because of COVID. More so now because we get a chance to actually sit with our families and friends and not be distracted by other things that are happening. So now that we will have quiet time with our families and friends during this season, and we're gonna be cooking more, hopefully indoors more than out. We want to make sure that people are aware, and this is so timely. I'm so happy that I went to the food handlers session, and I learned so much. And I'm even now, as we spoke this morning, I am learning again. So I just want to thank you personally and professionally for coming. And I think this was well delivered, because I was blown away then, and I'm even more so now, because I'm going to use whatever you said to put it into place for Care Nursing Agency and all my clients' homes. I will make sure they see this series so that they can make the necessary changes. For me, empowering our people is important, and that they can make confirmed and consented decisions based on the information that they would have had. So thank you, Mr. Lake, for coming on to our series. Thank you.
You're welcome.